So, welcome to another episode of Run with Julia. But we're running today with Chris and Julia. I'm with Chris Collison, and Chris is amazing. She has had a career as a journalist. She was a top journalist for 30 years. In fact, award winning. I've got my piece of paper here to make sure I get all her accolades. She was editor of Women's Fitness. She was editor in chief of Women's Running, and she was editorial director of Men's Fitness. She's now, turning my page over, she's now an entertainment industry executive, and she's the music manager and agent representing the Orbison Project. I'm sure we'll talk something of Chris's work, but we're here to talk about her running. And funnily enough, we met December 2009, and we actually met running, Chris, didn't we? Because we had to run. She was launching women's running, and I had just written a book called Running to Learn. We had the same PR person who decided we'd be a good pair to get together to be on the radio to about 20 different stations on a snowy morning, and we were late. And would you remember, Chris? We had to run through the snow, didn't we?
I remember it very well. I mean, I think there was a problem with the tube, and what would have been like a two or three stops on the tube ended up being a run across London, and it was absolutely freezing. But I love the fact you turned to me and you said, "But this is why running's so brilliant, because we can just run. You know, we can run to this appointment." And immediately there was an immediate benefit of running. So right there and then.
Do you know, I'd forgotten I said that, but I did, and because we had to run quite a way, didn't we?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was a good, well, not by your standards in terms of what you've been doing in the last few years, but yeah, in busy, crowded London, where it's obviously very peoply. Yeah, I think it was about 4 miles or something.
And in those days, were you doing a lot of running, Chris? Because we're going to talk about your running, but you've been a journalist and now you're doing music promoting, which is really interesting. So, did the journalist aspect lead you into women's running and fitness, or was it the running that led you in?
Oh, great question. And thank you for that amazing intro, by the way. But I'd started running back in 1995. I'd been going to the gym and lifting weights, and I got very strong, but I also got kind of a bit bulky and blocky. And I actually started running for the reason that a lot of people do. I started for weight loss, and basically the weight came off very quickly. And I was quite surprised by how difficult running was to start with. I'd read somewhere that Madonna used to run 5 miles every day. It was around about the time that when the paparazzi were photographing her in Hyde Park running with her brother or her trainer at the time. And I thought she looked great, and I thought she's older than me and she looks terrific. And if she can run 5 miles every day, so can I. So I got on the treadmill thinking I'd just casually run 5 miles, and I hadn't run since I'd been at school. And after 5 minutes, I was in a terrible state. I was gasping for breath. And I realized that strength, physical strength, and cardiovascular fitness are obviously two completely different things. So I'd started then. I'd never really gone beyond 10K. And then when I joined women's running in 2009, I was persuaded, encouraged, bullied, call it what you will, not bullied, but I was encouraged to start entering races, get familiar with what it was like to have an experience at a race. And I just got the bug. I just got into half marathons and marathons.
How interesting. And you liked the competition, or was it, I mean, did you go for times, or did you go for the experience of having achieved it, or what was your motivation?
The motivation, I've always just got a buzz out of running, you know, that runner's high. I've done various other types of fitness. I still do strength training. I've done boxing fitness, which I love, and I enjoy all of it, but none of it gives me that buzz that running gave me. And it's one of those things. I just wanted to do more of it because I loved it so much. I'm not fast. I mean, I've never been fast. I'm the only person I'm in competition with is myself. And I've always been really interested in distance running. I've always been fascinated by the idea of just, you know, the Forrest Gump thing, you just keep on running. And that's really been the draw for me, but mostly that I just love the feeling that it gives me during and afterwards as well.
What is the feeling it gives you?
Everything feels better. Everything in my life feels better. It opens up possibilities in life. actually in 2009, which was when you and I first met and Women's Running Magazine launched. Unfortunately, it was also the same year that my late mum, Hazel, was diagnosed with vascular dementia. And that was a long journey of about 10 years of looking after her and meeting her needs and everything, and juggling what she needed in the way of support with a busy job. And I honestly don't think, without running, I don't think I would have coped half as well as I did. I don't know if I would have coped at all. But you know, we all have stuff going on in life, but you can have the same problems. But when you run and you get that buzz and that high, and you feel good about yourself and what you've achieved, it just improves your ability to deal with all of the challenges that life throws at you.
Yeah, in 10 years, it's a very long journey, and an increasingly decreasing journey at a level.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it tends to go that the further along the person is in their dementia journey, the more help and support they're likely to need, and then you start having a lot of unpredictable challenges that you can't really prepare for. Phone calls at all hours and things going wrong that you just wouldn't imagine could happen in a million years. So actually, to have some time for yourself and be in a position where you can, you know, even if it's just 20 minutes. I mean, there were times when it was 15 or 20 minutes was the best that I could manage in a given day, but that still made a difference, a phenomenal difference.
Yeah. And you did go every day, so you maintained your routine, or
Yeah.
not, even if it was 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I exercised every day. I'm not, I don't think I've got a natural build for running. I'm quite short, I'm quite stocky, I'm quite muscular, a little bit overweight. You know, I don't think anybody would look at me and say that is a person with a runner's body. But I'm like to think that anybody that's got a passion for it can do it. But I'm quite flat-footed, I'm quite heavy on my feet. So apart from having the right trainers, which is obviously hugely important, somebody with my build, it's better to run every other day. So I exercise every day, but on non-running days, it will be low impact cardio like cross trainer and strength training and stretching. But I'll always aim to run minimum, you know, 3 times a week, ideally 4.
I think it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I would agree that absolutely everybody can run, and I have been witness to the running boom. Obviously, I started running in the 70s, and I've seen the running boom come all up through the 80s. And I think that you're absolutely right that everybody can run, but it's good to go with your body and go with its natural inclinations. And therefore, some bodies can run miles and miles and miles, and some bodies will like to run slower, some like to run shorter, faster. So no, I think, and did you naturally find that yourself, or did you have to learn because you did try to do too much, or?
Yeah, I did it. I mean, I did the classic thing. I've got quite an addictive personality anyway, and I started running at 27, and there was a bit of ego there, to say the least, about the changes in my body, that I liked being thinner. I liked the fact that, you know, hey, I'll be honest, I like the fact that I got a bit more attention when I was a bit thinner, and yeah, there was a bit of ego there. So I did it 5 or 6 times a week, usually 6 times a week. And I did that for about a year, but then my body started to break down a bit. I got a stress fracture on the shin. I started to get a bit of sciatica. My body was basically saying, look, this is not right. This is not, you know, every single day. And every single day I was pushing myself as well. I mean, I say I've never been fast, but I wouldn't ever think, well, today I'm going to have a slightly easier day. You know, I'm going to jog a little bit, or I'm going to do a little bit less. Every day I was just hammering it 110 miles an hour. Well, not that fast, obviously, wouldn't that be something? But yeah, in my head, I was just pushing myself really hard. And I think your body's very good at telling you, you know, whether or not it's the right thing.
And you listened, or did it take any injuries?
Well, yeah, I didn't have a choice really. I mean, with a stress fracture, unfortunately, on the shin, you can't load on that for too, you know, in a high impact nature that running is for a couple of months. So I've had quite a few injuries and niggles. I think as you get older and you become less concerned about how you look, and much more concerned about being able to do the things that you enjoy, you do become a lot more sensible. And unfortunately, I've had quite a few injuries, and I know when not to push. And yesterday I did a slightly longer run than I've been doing, so today was a strength day. Tomorrow will be a slightly shorter run, just to kind of ease back a little bit. And it's having the discipline to rein yourself in.
You're absolutely right. It's fascinating. Discipline isn't necessarily doing more and more and more. Discipline can be doing less. Also, you were told by a surgeon, because you've also had a cruciate ligament injury?
It was a meniscus tear on the left knee, on the inside of the left knee. Yes, a tear back in, well, it happened in September 2011, but it wasn't diagnosed immediately. So it was November 2011 that I realised what had actually happened.
And you were told you wouldn't run?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the knee surgeon basically said, well, unfortunately at the time, I'd done the Brighton Marathon in April 2011, trained really well for that, had a really good race experience. I loved everything about that race. Then got the bug for distances and decided to train for the Loch Ness Marathon that was in October of the same year. And the trouble is, as I was at the time, being a magazine editor, I'm constantly interviewing people like you who are amazing, who run miles and miles and miles all the time. And you think, God, if that person can do it, I can do it, and you get the bug. And unfortunately, for some of us, it doesn't always go to plan. But yeah, the knee surgeon said, you've torn the meniscus. And he said, they wanted to do an arthroscopy, which is where they go in with a camera and have a poke around. And he trimmed where the tear was. They can trim it. They can't stitch it back together. And obviously, the meniscus does support. It's supposed to help with shock absorption of the impact of running. So it's supposed to be a shock absorber. And obviously, if it's not in good condition itself, it can't do its job. So the surgeon was quite adamant that you won't run again. But fortunately, I had a very good physio, a dear friend of mine, Stuart Mailer, who he'd been on tour with U2. He'd been the physio for a member of the band U2, and he'd been away for about a year or so with them. And he came back, and I'd seen another physio purely because he wasn't around, obviously because he was away, who'd missed the tear and just said, "Oh, I think you've just overexerted yourself a bit." And he said, "No, this definitely doesn't look right." And once I'd had the MRI and it had been confirmed, Stuart was amazing. He said, "Look, everyone's going to have challenges." He said, "We don't give up, we adapt, we adjust." And he basically rehabbed me after the arthroscopy. The knee surgeon, despite being extremely negative, did a great job of stitching or trimming what he could. And he was actually said to me months later, he said, you proved me wrong. And he was happy to be interviewed in Women's Running magazine about it. And he was quite happy to admit that he'd been wrong, and he was quite happy that he'd been wrong.
That's very good, isn't it? Good man. And it interests me what you said about interviewing lots of runners, that it rather than it did inspire, but that actually you had to learn to do your own thing, because people are different. Because yes, you must have interviewed so many people over the years.
Yeah, I remember thinking, I didn't used to be very good at getting up and training in the morning. And I remember one morning getting up and going out for a 40-minute run before work, which was a big deal for me because I used to do my runs in the evening, and feeling very proud of myself. And then I got back to my desk and interviewed the ultra runner, Pam Reed, the American lady. And she was the lady who set the world record for the Badwater Ultra Marathon. And she'd been out and she'd run for about 3 hours before breakfast. She'd been up at 4 a.m. So it's you're proud of your own achievements, and then there's people like that, and like your good self. I mean, what you've done, I'm in awe of people like you, because honestly, I just don't know how you do it.
I don't do as much now, Chris. I'm in awe of the younger me. I'm in total awe of everything she did. I think though that a lot of the time when I was younger, I was always keen to be centered. I've always been on what could loosely be termed a spiritual path since I was very young. So I was always aware that I wanted my running to be an expression of my soul in motion, as it were. However, my ego got involved, and my ego got involved, and I was a fast runner. So my ego got involved with times and positions and all of that. But I was always on a perpetual cycle of wanting to come back to center. But I do wonder, as I've evolved, that I haven't got the same attachment to my ego, and therefore I'm not as keen to put myself through what I put myself through in my teens, 20s and 30s. So, now I definitely don't do what I used to do.
I think ego is a dangerous thing as well, isn't it? It's that thing in your head. For me, when you're running and you think, oh, I could just do a little bit longer. And actually, if that is significantly more than you've been doing. So for example, if you're adding distance and you say today I'm going to run for X amount of time, if you achieve that and you're tempted to keep going, I think that's a dangerous place to be. And part of that is ego, and part of that is just kind of getting hooked in, getting a bit lost in the moment. And I think ego can be your undoing if you're not careful.
But part of it can be enthusiasm, and it
Yeah.
is getting to know yourself so well and to be so aware. And of course, that takes practice, and it takes making mistakes. What I'm also interested in is, one of the reasons that we're talking now is because on Facebook, you'd written a wonderful post about never giving up. So it's so interesting. We must never give up, but as you've been expressing, we've also got to know when not to go forward. So
Yeah.
when you wrote that post, what was the motivation for that in this current running career?
Yeah, well, I've kind of come back to running. I've not really taken it that seriously for the last couple of years because I don't want to sound like doom and gloom. I'm genuinely positive about running. There's so many benefits, so I don't want to put anybody off. But unfortunately, I have had sort of fair share of niggles over the last couple of years, and probably a lot of that is sitting at a desk and not doing enough stretching. So, but I've not really been able to get back into it properly for the last couple of years. And then basically at the start of November, I just made a commitment to myself that I was going to run 3 times a week. And they're only going to be short runs, and they were going to be on the treadmill to start with, which not everybody's thing. But for me, with the knee history, the treadmill is quite obviously gives you that extra bit of absorption. And I just made a commitment to do it and achieved it. And then obviously December, I've been building up and increasing the distance and started doing 4 times a week. And it's gone really well. And I think a lot of that is down to doing the strength training as well. So, strengthening the leg muscles and the core and the muscles around the knee so that the knee gets as much support as possible. And I think it was because I was quite close to giving up. I have had moments this year where I thought I'm not getting anything out of running, and I can't get into a rhythm with it, if you pardon the pun, and I might as well just do something else, take up kickboxing or something like that, start kicking pads or something. But I really would just prefer to run. So it was about being very close to giving up, but thinking actually, no, just make a commitment and build it up gradually and do all the sensible things in between.
It's interesting about the treadmill because I love treadmill running, and I've had a history of having to work with a wonky 4th vertebrae and a scoliosis in my spine because of a car accident when I was 17 and a riding accident when I was 8, and both of them wonked my 4th vertebrae out, which then has created the scoliosis. So I have to look after my core, particularly in my back and my pelvis. But I love treadmill running for the very reason you said, that the absorption and the straight lineness of it, that there's not the kind of potential of wonking you about. And what, on a treadmill, do you listen to something? Do you listen to podcasts, or do you just run, or what do you do?
Yeah, I play music. I love music anyway, but I like to have upbeat house music. And I wouldn't go to even when I was younger, I wouldn't go to a club and listen to house music. But it works for running. It's that beat. And I agree with you. It's the straight line running is really good if you've had a knee problem. Trail running wouldn't work for me. I have tried a bit of off-road running, but the knee is trying to stabilize you when you're running, and it can cause issues. And I I like the fact that on the treadmill, you're doing laps as well. And obviously you can play around with the speed and the incline. So it can be really effective. Obviously, the only thing you can't really replicate properly on a treadmill is the elements. But yeah, I did run outside on Christmas Day and it was very mild, but it was very windy. And yeah, of course it's harder, you notice the difference, but the treadmill is very effective.
I love treadmill running, and I was inspired because Greta Weitz and Ingrid Christiansen, who are my kind of era, lived in Norway, and they did do some cross-country skiing, I think particularly Ingrid, but they use the treadmill loads for their training.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's good. That's amazing.
And it inspired me because back then in the 80s, Nigel and I had a gym and we had a treadmill, and we used to do intervals, swapping. We'd do 5 times 1,000, and the recovery would be the other person's 1,000, which means Nigel had longer recovery than me, because his were quicker. But I've always loved treadmill running, and also I like getting into my inner self, so I'm not really bothered about what's outside. So there's just the feeling of running. Yeah. This is an interesting. So you went out on Christmas Day, you say. So
yeah.
But are you going outdoors much, and have you a goal, or is it just to run?
Yeah, I'm not really planning to do much outside until the spring. I'm not a big fan of the cold weather, and nor is my knee. So yeah, so I was very lucky that it was Christmas Day I run. I always run on Christmas Day, however fit or unfit I am. It's just something that I love to do. It's part of the day for me. I'm planning to stick to the treadmill until the spring, and just building up the mileage and the speed. Planning to do a half marathon next August, and maybe a couple of 10Ks somewhere in between, which is, you know, it doesn't sound a lot compared to what I've done in the past, but I think now my goal is to be able to run without pain. That's enough for me. That is more than enough for me.
I think the running without pain is a joyous thing. And also it's interesting what you said about not finding anything else. And funnily enough, I was talking to Anadi, my husband, today or yesterday, about the fact that I've never been drawn to anything else. And even though I like swimming, I wouldn't want to compete at it. And yeah. I've cycled, but everybody was terrified I'd die on my bike because I was completely hopeless bike handler. And my fitness meant I was quite fast and good on a bike, but terrible at bike handling. And I never really felt that I would stay alive on a bike. So I abandoned cycling. But it is interesting, there's not another thing. Nothing else has ever grabbed me. So you've always running before running, was there anything else, or was running your main first?
Yeah, it was just training. I joined a gym when I was 20, I think I was 21, 22, back in the early 90s, just for something to do that didn't involve going to the pub. Nothing wrong with going to the pub, but I didn't particularly want to do it every night of the week, and I was a single girl, and yeah, I just thought, I thought it would be nice to get in slightly better shape and meet some new people, and it ticked all of the boxes. But yeah, my very first run as an adult was on the treadmill in the gym at the age of 27. I used to run a bit at school. I never had any real sporting talent, but I always used to really enjoy distance running. But I was quite a heavy kid, so what kids are like. Kids can be a bit nasty, and it put me off. And I wish that it hadn't. I wish that I just carried on doing it. But yeah, it's I haven't found anything, because I know you got into strength training. I remember seeing quite a bit of video of you doing some yoga and some amazing strength work on Facebook. Are you still doing that yourself? Or?
I think I've always done that. I've always done strength training because when I was 15, I joined an athletics club, and I was the only girl because my mum wasn't well, and so she couldn't take me anywhere. So I had to join an all-boys athletics club, and they weight trained in a gym, and they weight trained with just free weights. So I started weight training at 15, and I have always loved gym work. Absolutely in my element. It's interesting, we're quite rare birds for runners to be talking about our love of treadmill running, because it's often not something runners love. And I've always loved treadmill running and loved gym work. And so I've maintained gym work my whole life. Yeah, I loved it. And sometimes got stronger than others. Yeah, I think maybe I've done sudden challenges where I train to do 10 kettlebell squats with 28 kilos. I did that about 4 years ago, trained for that, did it, and then abandoned, and I couldn't lift 28 kilos now, probably for one squat. So I always maintain a strength, but not sometimes more than others.
I think it is really important. I do know a lot of runners that just want to run, and I completely understand why they would feel that way. But I do think strength training, I think there was an expression I heard years ago and it stuck with me: strength always underpins, and it really does.
Yeah, I agree. And what you said about the knee, it's the above and below the knee, isn't it, that needs to be strong. And if I've had pain, even though the problem is in my back, the pain has always been either hip, knee, or ankle.
Yeah.
So so now, well, I'm actually, before I ask you about now, I'm interested that you got into sports or fitness, running, journalism, but journalism, was that before? So you had started as a journalist before you did fitness journalism and running journalism?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, my first job was in a publishing company at the age of 19, and I always loved writing and journalism, and worked on music magazines actually before I got into fitness, and was the editor of the Gladiators magazine in the early 90s. So there was a little bit of fitness from an early age, but I worked on classic rock and Metal Hammer magazines, and had some great nights out going to gigs and enjoying the free bars and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's from about 2001 that I launched my own magazine, Women's Fitness, because I could see a lot of women in the gym that weren't really getting a great deal of help and support, and they didn't seem to know what to do. And obviously there was no internet then, you couldn't look up an exercise or how to do it. You either had to pay a personal trainer to help you, or you just had to kind of figure it out on your own. And that was kind of what inspired me to launch the magazine.
How interesting that you're now in the music world again.
Yeah, it's kind of come full circle, hasn't it? Really, yes. Yeah.
So did you, yeah, tell us about that, because, and does the, yes, tell us about the music, because you were in music at the beginning and now you're promoting the Orbison Project. So how?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, it's all my husband's fault, really. I mean, basically, I met my now husband Dave back in 2017, and I met him at a gig. He was performing as a Roy Orbison tribute, and I thought he was brilliant, and I couldn't believe anybody could sing those songs as well as Roy Orbison, but he could and he can. And the only thing that he hadn't been that comfortable doing was the marketing side, which is obviously so important. You know, he had all of the talent, but not really not so much the inclination. Probably didn't really have the confidence to sort of ring people up and say, you need to book me. And I think it's very hard to ring someone up and brag about how good you are yourself, you know. And but I can do that for him. You know, I can ring venues up and say, well, you know, this guy, he's very experienced, he's a great singer, sounds just like Roy Orbison, and say it with conviction. So I just started managing his solo Roy Orbison tribute, and then just before COVID, unfortunately, we thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to put together a Roy Orbison tribute band? So he formed the Orbison Project, and it's a 6-piece band, and I manage that band as well. And we go all over the UK doing gigs and keep him busy.
I had it in my diary. I saw you were in Camden. I think it was Camden.
Yes.
Putney. Were you Putney or Camden, or both?
Both, actually, yes.
I put it in my diary, and something has happened that I haven't actually come. But now we've had this conversation, I'm definitely going to make sure that I turn up, because I've seen it. I was like, oh, that's near, because I'm in Chelsea. So
Yeah.
we can go. And I'd love to hear him. And if you're traveling the country, how do you manage to fit your running in and does he run?
No, he doesn't run. No, he's more, he likes cycling, so he's more comfortable on a bike. I think everyone's got their thing, haven't they? But he's very supportive of my running, actually. And I think in fact, I said to you before about a few occasions where I felt like giving up, and he was adamant that I shouldn't, and you know, encouraged me to stick with it. And I don't know whether I would have done actually without that encouragement. Well, most of the gigs are at weekends, and they can be anywhere. Actually, over the next week, most of them are fairly local to us, but we've been all over the place, and it's really a case of doing as much running as I can during the week, and then not being too hard on myself on a weekend. You know, it might be that the run is first thing in the morning before we leave for a gig, and it's got to be a short, easy run, because I don't want to wear myself out for the rest of the day, you know, when we're traveling. It's just about having the right attitude and not pushing myself too hard on during those days when it's busy, or expecting myself to go out and do too much the next day when we've not got to bed until 3 in the morning.
And yeah, that is very interesting. I mean, coming back to the not giving up, I think that, which is the original, as I say, post that you'd put on Facebook, I think that person saying something, it is worth keeping going. And you and I, probably us saying it, might, anybody who watches this might go, let's keep going. Because I've had a career that's been 53 years so far, since I started competing at 12. And I've had many times I've thought I'd like to give up. And I remember actually when I was 47, I'd been injured. And I just thought maybe I should stop and just do yoga and do gym. And two friends said to me, who I ran with, I don't think you really want to stop, Ju. And just those words, you just go, okay, maybe I'll just take another step. And I'm very glad I've never stopped. And I've had times where it's been very hard, or I've been very injured or ill, or all manner of things, or life, as you've said with your, you said that it helped you during looking after your mum. But
yes, massively.
But there must have been, times where what are the things that made you want to give up more? Is it the being injured, or?
Yeah, I think I went through a phase of just, it's almost like going out, having a great night out and getting drunk, which I don't do anymore, and then paying for it the next day. And the analogy is the paying for it the next day. I'd go out and have a good run, really enjoy it, come home and say, I had a great run. It was brilliant. It really got into that. And then the next day, just feeling really stiff in the lower back, knee hurting, achy, wiped out. And I think it was just being out of condition. And I think probably didn't like to admit to myself that I was out of condition. And so the commitment that I made in November, which there wasn't any time goal linked to it or any certain distance, the only thing that I was looking to achieve in November was consistency, was 3 runs a week, every week in November. Doesn't matter if some of them are 15 minutes, or it really, that's not important. What is important is the commitment to it. So really, you're taking a lot of the pressure off, because you're not out there for hours and hours or saying, I've got to do 5 miles today. You're just showing up, and that's it, which can be difficult to do. But just doing those shorter runs, it gave my body time to adapt. So I was probably just expecting a bit too much before.
And do you time your runs? Are you on Strava, or do you just go and see how you feel and go for time?
Yeah, I don't use Strava, but I've got an Apple Watch, and I do find the data on it really helpful, because obviously it logs the total number of runs that you do in a month, tells you your average speed, obviously your total distance. What it did tell me a couple of days ago was that my cardio recovery after, since November, in the last 13 weeks, it said, has improved. I've recovered faster after a run than I would have done 13 weeks ago, and that kind of, we all know that running is going to get us fitter, but when you actually see the proof in the statistics like that, it's really motivation.
It is interesting, because I'm from the era where I was on a run actually with Tracksmith, which are great. They do runs all around London. It's a clothing company. But I was running with a group, and I'm from the era with no data. So in the 70s, I was running with this guy who started running 10 years ago. And I said, I didn't have any watch, no data, no nothing. And he said, what did you do? How did you do it? And I said, I'd look at the dining room clock before I left, and then I'd go for my run, and I'd get my runs planned at weekends, and then I'd see how long it had been, run back in and look at the dining room clock. And then I knew if I wanted to do a run before school or something, I knew the runs and how long they were. And I said, I come from no data, and I don't really like data now. I'm a bit surprised because I often run without my Garmin. I just go and run.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit surprised if I've got it on when it announces to me how many steps I've done of itself. I haven't asked it.
Yeah, I must admit, I mean, I'm not really that into data, but I have found it quite useful. And I'm the same as you. You know, the only timer I had was in the 90s when I started was what the treadmill was telling me, you know, how long I'd been on there. And it obviously tells you distance and calories. But it's interesting, when I did the Brighton Marathon in 2011, I won't name the brand of sports watch, but the sports watch I was using, I'd used it all through my training to make sure I was covering sufficient distance. And on race day, it didn't work. And I'd got used to looking at it to know what my speed was through all of these long runs. So on race day, I thought, well, how will I know what speed I'm doing? How will I know whether it's too fast or too slow? And actually what I did, I thought, okay, we'll take what feels like your normal running speed and ease back slightly, because it's a marathon, it's your first, you don't know how you're going to feel at mile 20. And that worked a treat. So actually not having it on race day did me a favour.
I think I prefer not to know too much, to be honest. And these days you can't not know a lot of the time, because if you're in a race, they let you know. And also, I used to quite like back in the day, doing a lot of my races as training, but fast, but going, but not necessarily then seeing what I'd done particularly, because you'd only find out by having to look in Athletics Weekly in the week, or you'd go and look at a board with all the stuff. But you wouldn't have to know if you just felt like, I want to do a tempo run, I don't really want to know my time. But now you can't get away with it because it pops into your email.
Yeah, there is that. And even on the treadmill, and I used to remember a lot of people in my old gym used to put their towel over the treadmill so they wouldn't know how long they'd been running, over the console. So that
I'm one of those people.
Maybe it was you.
Oh, Chris, I could talk to you for ages, but I think we better stop. But I would there's so much. It's very interesting, isn't it? Where it's more than running. It's our expression. Yes. So have you anything that you'd like to say before we finish, which we haven't covered, or that you could offer to anyone?
Yeah, just really that, as I mentioned at the beginning, that I genuinely believe that as long as you build it up gradually, and you're healthy, and if you're worried about your health, obviously get checked out first, but that you can run. And I mean, I'm a member of a local Facebook group called Running Colchester, because I live in Colchester. Somebody posted on there yesterday that they're chuffed that they're up to 25 minutes. And they said a month ago they couldn't run for 3 minutes, and now they're looking at another goal, and they did Couch to 5K. And just, there is a lot of support out there, and don't think you have to be a certain build or level of fitness. You don't have to be fit in order to run. Running will get you fitter. So approach it, if you'd like to do it, approach it with an open mind, and it's absolutely doable.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. I've loved this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to take part. I was thrilled to get your invitation, and I look forward to well, no one likes seeing themselves on screen, but yeah, I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you, Chris. I so enjoyed talking with Chris, and it's brilliant. I'm still here in sunny Lanzarote, and she's in Colchester, and we're able to have these conversations. I love it. And if you'd like to tell me your story, tell me your running story, I would love to hear it. So please let me know. And if you've liked the video, please press the thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. And thank you. I'll see you next time.